Electrocast.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. Introducing the all-new, all-terrain Honda Passport Trail Sport, the most off-road capable Honda Passport Honda has ever dreamt up. The Passport features increased ground clearance, roof rails on all trims, and available specially developed all-terrain tires. And you'll stay comfortable with tri-zone climate control and available features like heated and ventilated front seats and a panoramic moonroof. Learn more at honda.com/passport.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Brain Arcade Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cross. I get asked all the time how I got to my position as a creative director. But how I got here is so untraditional and so self-taught because of the time I came up that it's not so much the path that's interesting, but the driving force behind it and how I got started in the first place. So today I'm going to share my career journey and talk about the psychology of asking why and grinding through life goals. We have Liam McDonough here again today. He's the founder of Nova Codes with a background in neuroscience and has made games to help kids' brains at Cornell. I'm really excited to share this crazy journey with you all. Let's get into it.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to amend my hot take a little bit. Getting a college level degree certified education in game design has no professional value.
Okay. I mean, the first thing I think about is I put myself in the seat of an 18-year-old who loves to make RPG Maker games, and I say to myself, "Well, I was about to major in game design." So, but you as someone with 20 plus years in the industry is telling me it's worthless. Okay. So tell me more. Is my now am I going to forego college whatsoever, or like what do I do?
So let me qualify this, right? Okay. I worded that very specifically.
Deal.
So it is not worthless. I said it has no professional value. There's a distinction. So there is value in the education, but the actual impact of that on your professional career is not, set your expectations correctly. Because in some cases, it's going to be super valuable. In some other cases, it's not. But essentially, just getting a game design degree doesn't mean you're a good game designer, and it doesn't mean you're going to get a job.
I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I'm curious to learn more. What comes up for me is I think about, so we're good friends with, some of our best friends are doctors, for example. Yeah. And they go on and on. They'll tell me so many of the doctors that they know are terrible doctors. Right? Yeah. They cannot believe they got a freaking degree, because it's one thing to be able to pass a very mentally taxing test in order to become a doctor, right? Legally, you are a doctor, yes. But in terms of decision making in real time for hours on end with the crazy shifts that doctors have, they are blown away with some decisions that doctors made. And I think that's easy to relate to, right? So sure. I can see why if you end up, and in my experience, right? I got a degree in neuroscience, right? I went to go make games to help people with their brains for neuroscience, right? Using neuroscience stuff. But the amount of times I needed to reconsider basic biology, which I learned, right? Or even some of the more crazy stuff about the brain that I learned, the amount that actually applied to my real job was about 6%, let's say. Maybe 6%.
Specific.
Right?
Yeah. 6%.
6%. Yeah. So 6% retention rate on the actual data. So I can pull niche facts out of the back of my pocket now, which is cool. But in terms of applicable things that are applicable, it was like 6%. Maybe I'll be generous, 10%, whatever.
Sure.
So
10%.
So why, as a game designer, if I'm going, say I want to go to U of A, I want to live in Arizona, I want to party, I want to get a degree in game design.
Yep.
Why is it a total waste of time? Am I basically just wasting my money?
So I don't think it's a total waste of time, but let me give you a couple of different POVs, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about professional value, right? So bullet point 1, when I see that you have a degree, or when a resume comes across my desk and it says that you have a degree in game design from X university, I don't know who taught you. I don't know what they taught you. I have no idea what the curriculum was. I have no idea how well you did at that curriculum, regardless of what your grade GPA is, right? So basically, I have no context because it's not standardized. So in neuroscience, at least there's some standardization or some accepted practices
Sure.
that you can then lean on and say, okay, yes, people are coming out and being terrible doctors, but at least I know that they have a base value of
Yeah.
information that we can then sort of work on, right?
If you say sodium to the kid, he's not gonna go
Sure.
crazy, right? Okay, he knows what sodium is. He knows what calcium is. He knows that the brain does
Right.
X, Y, and
Yeah,
Z.
yeah, yeah.
These basic
Exactly.
levels of stuff. Okay, so you're saying it's basically totally nebulous, like, or it's like totally like abstract, or it's different curriculums for every place.
Basically, different curriculums from every place. Game designers grew up very tribal, teach yourself. And so I know that I worked with a teacher in northern Midwest. His students, because I know him, I know will have some foundation in a few things, but I haven't encountered one yet. And I'm curious to see how many of the things that came out of us working together are filtered into what he's teaching, right?
The actual curriculum. Yeah.
Right. And I actually don't care anymore how much of what I taught makes it through. Like if I said, oh, this is the schema that I'm working on, or this is the structure, and this is how I apply it, and this is X, Y, and Z. This is actually going to be like the more like positive viewpoint on what I'm saying.
Okay.
I used to think there was 3 right ways to think about and make games.
Okay.
Not 3, but like there was a method. And we all sort of followed it in the 90s. And it was basically, it was more on the rails as far as a way of thinking and sort of approaching things than the way things work now. However, it was geared towards a different market. And I'll sort of qualify this stuff a little bit later. So put a pin in that. So market,
Okay.
like where does market come in? However, my viewpoint now as an older game gentleman is in hindsight.
Sure. I like the way you said that. Yeah.
In hindsight, there are actually almost an infinite amount of ways to get to the product. What I'm saying is it's not that the education part of it doesn't have value. It's just such a small slice of what's possible.
Yeah.
That I don't know what you've learned, and I don't know what foundational trajectory you're on. So essentially, there's no value to me as a hiring manager to say, oh, I have a starting.
So like as a hiring manager, for example, and I like what I heard you say about there's infinite ways to actually do something in the context of this, right? It's there's infinite ways I could design something. And then on the engineering side of things too, there's infinite ways I could actually engineer something as well. Right. So I take this game design document or these ideas, I translate it into code. Right. So if there's basically unlimited ways to get to the same solution, and you've got this person on your desk, they went to X university, now they have a game design degree. Do you have preferences when you're hiring? So are you looking? So if I'm trying to get a job in the games industry, right, and I'm really interested in game design,
role playing.
I'm role playing.
Yeah.
This is an RPG, IRL RPG.
Right.
If I'm 18 and I really want to get a job in the games industry and I want to design games, would you recommend that I go towards a degree to get a foundation, or do I have a conversation with my parents and then I just try to get a job at Ubisoft and apprentice under someone? Just go right to like internships and would you prefer me have 4 years of game experience as a 22-year-old in studio, or would you prefer kind of a education?
So once again, I can't give you a straight answer. Like I basically have to give you no.
It's okay.
So
It's okay. Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
but let's qualify some of this. Like I want to switch the. I understand your ask. Let's come back to that. And my short answer, the TLDR answer is I don't know. It depends on your starting point, and then it also comes down to what are your expectations of what you get out of the education, right? So let me tell you a little bit about my story, and we'll sort of come back to this. Okay.
Fantastic.
So here's the short version. So I went to UCLA, worked very hard to get in there. It's close to home, good university, but I went in undeclared. No idea what I'm doing. Partway through the first year, I got really ill, like really ill. I thought I had the flu. later I was like, okay, it's all good. So basically, whatever I had, I just kind of muscled through, right?
Okay.
So I get to the other side of it. I go to give blood, and they reject my blood. And they're like, you had hepatitis B. And I was like, what? All of a sudden, boom, research into hepatitis B. I was on a floor with like lots of like pre-med biology,
Sure.
doctor-y kind of people. And so like the research was fast and furious. Within a couple days, we had all the details, right? Like blood transmission, X, Y, and Z. Not a lot is known as blah, blah, blah. It's a virus. So we deduced that I had gotten hepatitis B from my mom congenitally because I had sort of a rough childbirth.
Okay.
And so like she had it, and my mom is Korean. So basically that like hepatitis variations are very common in Korea. At that time, not anymore. At that time. But what happened was I hit 18 or 19 sort of maturity, and it's a liver virus. So basically like got into a situation where like I sort of activated the virus. I got sick. All of a sudden, mind shift changed for me. Right. So I went from.
Was that the most sick you'd ever been at that point?
Is the most sick I'd ever been in my life. Anyway, at that time, I said, fuck, what am I doing? And it's,
like
when you're
undeclared at a university, like
I'm
I basically don't have
undeclared.
time to waste, right?
I don't have time to waste. I was approaching from an explorative POV. I'll take a bunch of stuff, and maybe it takes me 5-6 years to get out of here, right? Like,
Sure.
But I was already, the seeds of thought were like, what am I gonna take? What's the trajectory of my life? And my brand of spectrum cresting was like, I wanted order, right?
Yeah,
Like in my head, I was going to come out of school and have a 25-year job, retire, and then play video games for the rest of my sort of like golden years. So at that time, and I didn't have the answer, and I sort of fumbled around for a while. But the things that your subconscious does is it works on you through the things you do. I was playing lots of Street Fighter 2 at the time. I was playing lots of computer games, moved out of the dorms, figure out how to get a new Pentium computer to play like TIE Fighter and Warcraft and, Dune 2, Building of a Dynasty, all this stuff.
You're still in college, right?
Still in college.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still in, but I'm sort of hanging on by
Okay.
Everything became why. Why am I taking this English, like intro English class?
I get it.
What's the point?
And I love hearing that too, as a quick aside, because I feel like asking the why, people always ask, like, how do you be successful? And in this context, right, if we think about, oh, you want to get into the games industry, right? Saying no, right? Like basically asking the question why, and where I feel you're going with this is like, these things are no. Certain things are no because the answer to them is why? Well, this is fucking stupid. Right?
Right.
If I've ever been in a place where I am not happy with things, I just ask why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And if they get me to where I want to go, I visualize where I want to go and the result of it. And I just say no to everything. Right now I'm in a huge no mode. And I feel sorry for my wife because I'm in such no mode. But because there are certain things that I'm not doing, right? I care a lot about her. Right. So just TLDR, I heard you say you're asking yourself why.
Right.
And I think that is one of the best ways to change your life. Just hands down. Why? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that?
1000% agree, because we're approaching the point where my life took a totally different trajectory. So I was working in a little console shop in the middle of Westwood. So I had the best of both worlds there. I was selling and playing games a lot, discussing them with players, having like customer interaction. In hindsight, I've been a game designer my whole life. I just didn't know it. So I get this job. I'm doing the thing, kind of run by a pseudo gangster with an Argentinian background and some shady stuff going on, so I'm sort of getting some life lessons too. Like there's some like educations of cross TV show built into this. So
were you close with him, or was it just
we were close?
Okay, you were buddies.
But that's how I got the job. I was hanging out a lot, and the guy was like, "Hey, you want to watch the counter for me?" I was like, "Sure, I'll hang out." And then he took off, go get lunch and come back. He's like, you want a job? Like, why don't you just like, it just kind of casually happened.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Like I was hanging out enough. People like to talk to me about games. We kind of got to be buddies, and I essentially just kind of got a job out of it. Right. Nice. He was like, okay, hey, can you work Tuesday? Blah, blah, blah.
He was kind of a shadester, basically.
Well, he was a hustler.
In some ways.
Yeah, he was hustling, and not everything that he did was 100% legal, but he was always looking for an angle. So he wasn't like a criminal, but there were definitely some like gray area moves that were happening both on scene and behind the scenes. I'll just say that one of those ended up with like there was a black unmarked car parked in the red across the street from the store, and it had a placard on it that says, "Do not tamper with, move, or tow this vehicle. Official FBI transportation."
Okay.
Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Wow, the FBI are here!" Like,
whoa!
This stupid little thing that was going on got some attention, right? Anyway, I'll tell you that story another day. Sure. So we're doing that. I'm playing games at night. I'm essentially working the store. I'm not going to class.
You're still in college? Oh, okay. Okay. So still officially enrolled, but you're basically just not going
I'm enrolled, but I'm fucking failing everything. Not because I'm dumb, but because I was just not applying myself to it, because why? And so I tried to take classes that were interesting to me, but why?
What year was this too?
Second year, so 19. In the midst of all this, I'm still socializing with friends. They've all got trajectories. I've got a guy, start talking to this one friend. He dropped out second year and built a web company. Remember, it's 1992, 93. Like, he built a web company like early days and moved back to San Francisco and made a fortune early on. I don't know whether he kept it or whether he translated that into larger business dealings, or whether he just retired or went to Fiji. Who knows? Anyway, he's the one that really kicked it off. 5 people in the span of 4 weeks stopped me mid-sentence, had like literally said something to the effect of, "I have no idea what you're talking about. It's clear that you're passionate about games. You haven't seen this kind of passion in anything that you do, period. You should go make games. Figure it out." You get that first one and you're like, there's no career in games, right?
Well, and especially back then, right? Because you're actually like, now it's like, okay, $300 billion industry, all this stuff, right? But back then it really was, it was much fun.
It was like we were just leaving the era where people were putting floppy disks in the poly bags and selling them at Eggheads like for $5, and like printing their own floppy disk copies to put in these bags for PC installs, right? Like there were established companies making cartridges, but like you could count them on 2 hands. Or at least the ones you knew about. There were like lots of companies out there. They're all small mom and pop shops, but it was black box. There was no internet. I couldn't look up Silicon and Synapse and say, what does this company do? Right? Mm-hmm. Like the stuff was all, there was no way to do that stuff. And so, I put together a really, really empty resume and, targeted 3 companies that I eventually ended up working at in the first 10 years of my career. All 3 at some stake. And basically,
which one were those, by the way?
Activision, DreamWorks Interactive, and Blizzard.
Oh, nice.
So my first job was a QA analyst or a tester at Blizzard. But back in those days, you were a full-time employee. There was none of this temp job. Like, put a pin in that. We'll talk about Warcraft 2 and what QA was then and what it is now.
Oh, and for anyone who's not hip, that's quality assurance.
Quality assurance, yes.
So basically, you just make sure that the game is actually good, and you look for bugs, and you tell the developers about the bugs, or maybe you sort them out yourself.
Yeah, the reason I use the 2 words quality assurance and tester is there's sort of 2 functions in those jobs. Tester was basically temp hires that would go and do like, I'm playing like a player, and I'm just gonna write down the bad things that happen. And then quality assurance was a level up in professionalism as far as like, oh, we need to go test the tools now. Hey, we need to go do this other thing. Or like, once you're at that level, people take gameplay suggestions from you, not just the shit's broken.
Right.
Okay. So I was like, I'll get in as a tester. Here's my plan. I'm going to get in as a tester, go for 6 months, figure out which position I want, and then go back to school. Because if I come back with a plan, I'll have a why.
Makes sense.
Right?
Oh, very cool. Okay. So you would go back to education basically after you figured out what you would want to go further with.
Yes.
Very
That's
cool.
right.
Very cool.
So I went after 6 months or 9 months. After that much time, my timer ran out. I started learning 3D modeling and animation and stuff because 3D Studio Max was brand new. And so like I had an opportunity to jump on that wave before it broke. Surfing analogy, you want to get on the wave before it breaks. So basically I was catching it early days to catch the momentum, but that wasn't really for me. I tried teaching myself C++ just to get a feel for it and talk to engineers. And because I had QA status, not tester status, and I asked relatively smart questions, I kind of had free reign of the company to start talking to people and ask them what they do, what's going on. I'm young, I'm trying to figure it out. And the people were very open.
And quickly for reference, so C++ is basically the coding language for a lot of video games. And like, for example, if you've ever played like Fortnite is coded in an engine. So now there's big engines, right? Called like Unreal Engine, but that's coded in a language called C++. So just for reference.
Yes. So we have a coding language. By the way, engines didn't exist back then. You had to build all your own
there
engines.
was no engine. By the way, do you know why the Unreal Engine is named Unreal Engine? Because there was a game called freaking Unreal.
Unreal. Yes, exactly.
Which they needed to build the Unreal Engine for. And suddenly
and then they said, let's sell this engine or like make this engine available to other people because we've solved a bunch of problems, right? So after 6 months, and then I was like, this guy comes down the stairs. I start talking to him, and I'm talking to him about the balance of stuff and my gameplay experience. And we get jiving, and I'm like, you get that internal feeling when your brain says, "Oh, this is your tribe. Like these are your people." And at that moment, I was like, what does this guy do? Oh, he's a game designer. I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm going to become a game designer, right? And so I was like, okay, so I applied myself for several weeks to write a curriculum for what would I need to be a good game designer.
Like at UCLA?
Yeah, at UCLA. Okay. So how do I design a major for myself to come out the other side and be prepared for this job based on what I'm seeing, what I'm doing? And like at that time, every game was original. There were no there were clones, but there were no like fast follow markets, or it's Fortnite but with penguins, right? Like there was none of that. Right, it's Pow World, right? It's at that time the skill set that you kind of wanted was a jack of all trades, and this defines the rest of my career, because basically for me I have a hacker mentality. Always have. Anyway, I soon realized that I was going to create a curriculum that had too many credits.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Right? Because the areas, and I didn't know how to put it in words at that time, but basically I was like, I struggled over the next couple of decades, probably up until, my career spans 30 plus years. So like the first 2 decades, I kept refining what I thought that curriculum would be. And it was always too big. It was like, and it started to, as the industry grew, it not only got bigger, it got specializations. And so now we were talking about a whole department, and essentially I gave up at some point because I also realized over the years that I'm not an academic in the way that thrives in structured education, both from a teacher standpoint, but also from a student standpoint. Because of that part of my brain that asks why. There are good justifications for stuff, but then there are other things like, what is with this red tape? Yeah. Like what is going on here? And so
why would I even like abide by this?
Yeah. And also thousands of interviews of people coming in for game design jobs. So I got to see how people learned, what they learned, how they came up in the ranks. And back then it was very common for people to start as testers or QA and get promoted up, or come in from other side areas and then realize they had a spark for game design and do it.
So is that actually like, so in your career path, like you started as a tester, you became QA working at Blizzard, right? And then did you shift into another company, and that's when you got a chance to promote into like a design role, because QA is kind of a mix of design and testing?
Kind of, yeah. And so let me give you the TLDR of this that fits back into the topic, which is essentially I had to actively career manage myself to this day. Because
right now you're a studio director, right? So basically, you
and
manage a shitload of people.
freelance guy, right?
And freelance kind of consultation and design commission.
Right. And my core, as much as I put on different hats, like my core is still always game design. My lens into what we're doing is always game design.
Sure. Totally.
Right. So basically, I did what I called the 2-5-10 at the time, which is a 2-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And my 2-year plan was become a game designer, 5-year plan was become a lead game designer, and 10-year plan was to, pitch my own game. Or basically, at that time, there was no bootstrapping your own game company unless you went into severe debt.
There was no indie.
Well, there was indie, but you had to be severely privileged or have opportunities to like have the economics to be able to do it. Now, it was cheaper to make games, but it was also harder to fund.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So essentially, when I say 10-year game pitch, I'm not saying that I didn't want to be like a studio owner. What I was saying was that at that time, I wanted to pitch something that was amazing on console. So pitch Sony, pitch Microsoft, pitch you know what I mean? By the way, the first E3 Microsoft came out and they had a banner at E3 that said Microsoft knows games. We all laughed. We all like, it was hilarious for us. Okay, so back to the curriculum question. Here's one of the statements. At this time, there's no built-in value on someone's resume when I see that they came out of like Carnegie Mellon or DigiPen, or you know what I mean? Like there's some, because I have some understanding of what the different curricula are at the different schools. So I have some idea of what their baseline is and who teaches it, what they teach, what flavor of game design they got, right? Yeah. But once they get to me, it's like I still have to do the investigative work to figure out some of their soft skills. So that's why there's no professional value in paying for that education. Now, however, I'm not saying education is bad. Let me hit you with the other side of this. I was absolutely willing to go back and get a formal education towards the thing that I wanted, but it ended up being like, well, not only too many credits, but part of the reason I didn't go back was I was like, well, if I design my own thing and come back into the industry after leaving it, I will have lost any measure of momentum that I had currently. And like my networking ability at that time would have stalled. One of the most important things that comes from a formal education is the network that you build while you're there. And so there is value to learning things that you didn't know to then incorporate into your own thing. But the way I think of game designers coming out of college or starting on their own is like a wasteland Mad Max that is equipped with whatever they have, and they have to figure out how to get to the other side of the desert. It's the beginning of the quest. It's the beginning of the journey. You got a crap pistol, like a leather jacket, and a comb, and you have to figure out how to get across the wasteland to save the world somehow, and that's where everybody starts. And so it's essentially going to get a formal education is like starting a role-playing game with like, what's your character's origin? And it's one of like many options.
Yes.
Right. I know that's a deep analogy that I'm not sure everybody's going to get, but I'm not sure how to explain it to people who don't play video games. But anyway, it's the abstraction is that like school is only going to prepare you so much. But that's true for any topic. You need to get out of a formal education what you need, not what they tell you. So anytime there's one truth in life for me that has come out, which is anytime that something has been sold to me as once you get through this waypoint, everything's going to be fine. The one truth that's come out of that is like, no, I've had to like punch, kick, and bite my way through everything forever, all the time. Learning is stuff that I internalized to turn into my own way of going forward.
I love what I heard you say, and I resonated so deeply. Sometimes when you have a goal, right, you build it up as, if I accomplish this goal, man, I'm totally done. I can finally rest. It's over. Yeah. It's over. It's such a lie. But the more you get comfortable with that being a lie, the easier life is. So like one of my favorite books it's a book called The Way of the Superior Man. And it's by, gosh, I forget the name off the top of my head, but fantastic. Basically a guy who went into neuroscience, then became a yogi for a while. Then he started writing books, right? Just about kind of the different ways that someone more feminine or masculine may act, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's not applicable in every situation, but generally it can kind of motivate you, right? It's built from a very powerful, commanding kind of presence or idea. And the first chapter of this book is it never ends. It never ends. Whether you're thinking about your significant other, whether you're thinking about work, it never ends. And I have a story for this. So for the longest time, I was trying to get my company to create revenue, whatever it was, right? When you're making any company, but let's talk about the games industry, right? You have your actual dev team and your product team. You also have your marketing and you have your sales, etc., right? And all of these pieces need to come together in order for you to make money, right? And the reason you make money is so you can feed your family or buy a car or whatever. So I finally got my first client, and for months I was telling myself, as soon as I get this first client in, man, my problems are solved. It's over. It's all going to be done. And then I got the check, right? And I thought that I'd be really happy. I had probably one of the worst nights sleep I ever had that night, because I realized the crippling reality that this never ends. I just have different problems now. Yes, I have the check, but I just have a different problem. Here's the good part about this. And this is actually, so bring it to the brain, right? You always have a certain amount of problems in life. So whether it's easier to have something called champagne problems, you might as well get rich so you have champagne problems as opposed to financial problems, right? But brain-wise, your brain is basically a really good computer at keeping you alive. That's its goal anyway. Sometimes it kind of fucks up. But generally speaking, it tries to keep you alive for as long as possible. With that being said, it needs to actively search for problems in order for it to tackle those and solve those. And that's basically why dopamine even exists in the first place. It's so you're motivated to, in the past it was to drink water and reproduce and have food and etc. And now we use it to make video games fun. But the reason I bring all of this up is because I think about myself if I were like 18 and kind of doing it all over again. So if I'm looking to get into the games industry, now knowing your story where you started at UCLA. It took about 1.5 years to realize that you wanted to stay in the games industry after being a QA person for 6 months, right? And tester, just stayed in the games industry. And ultimately that was really powerful because games now is pretty tight knit in terms of the networking, right? I mean, people, the same kind of people go to E3 and GDC, etc. You see the same faces. But even then, like 30 years ago, it was even more tight. So I think you ultimately made the right decision, and that's where you are today, right?
Yeah, it's a contributing factor for sure.
So, and now there's kind of the world of Mad Max, where basically you're just using the tools at your disposal to actually create something. So what if I'm 18, what do you think is the best way to become a killer game designer? If I want to impress you, right? I want a job with you. I want to work with Chris. What the heck do I do?
So here's another lie that's in there. Now it's Mad Max. It's always been Mad Max. It's always been a wasteland of, like, at least for game design. So game designers are a collection of soft skills, it's like hard skills that come together to make, like, to inform soft skills, right? So the curriculum that I would have built would have been intro psych, abnormal psych, like child psych. That's to ensure good connection in your video game to other people. Intro to architecture, right? Because we're going into 3D, so you have to understand your spaces.
Actually, as a side note there, so we hire architects to do level design for our team because there's just a sense of realism that you get with someone who actually has studied how buildings are created. It's like night and day. It's like night and day.
Just knowing the golden rectangle and points, lines, and planes changes the way your spaces will look. Now, the one thing the architects is they need to know when to break the rules. So part of the curriculum that I would build is learn the structures that people expect so you know where to intentionally break some rules.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So anyway, the rest of the curriculum is like that, where it's basically like a trip through the left side and right side of the brain and then picking a specialization. And so it's essentially like you would have to do some sort of self-evaluation of yourself, do a SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, like what is it?
I forget off the top of my head, but basically, if you look up SWOT analysis, you'll see.
Yeah, you find your strengths and weaknesses, and then make a decision on whether or not you're going to emphasize your strengths or bolster a weakness. And so that's what the first 2 years of game design college would be for me, and then the next 2 years would be specializing in like either a strength or a weakness. I would always recommend to a student a strength over a weakness. But because there are an infinite number of ways to be a game designer, that might not even be valuable at the end of college. So basically, I Kobayashi Maru'd myself. Kobayashi Maru is an unsolvable problem that you're not supposed to have a good result in Star Trek, that Captain Kirk, like wins by cheating. But basically, I put myself into like curriculum Kobayashi Maru. I was like, there's no winning. I cannot make a one size fits all for everybody that I would want to see in game design. So when an 18-year-old, to answer your question, when an 18-year-old shows up and I see their resume, for my own sanity, had to simplify my criteria to how do I discover these soft skills? Like the hard skills you can quantify. How good are they at coding? I can do a code review. Are they artistic? I can do a portfolio review. Are they organized? Are they, how production minded are they?
How can they, or like a game design document in essence is basically just the ideas behind a production. So.
Right. And so can I see a spreadsheet with organization? Like you can kind of get a sense of these hard skills of like, how good are they at those things? So in my head, by the way, I'm always creating a baseball card for every game designer I meet. Actually, it's everybody in games. I'm making a game designer baseball card for them, whether they're a game designer or not. Because it's like from Ratatouille, like Gusteau's, like everyone can cook. Everybody is a game designer. They just have more or less, soft skills or experience than everybody else. So we start there. I look at the resumes, game design resumes. I don't spend more than like 10 seconds, and I might highlight things that I want to ask questions about. But generally it gives me like, what was your previous trajectory? Because once I get you into a room to ask interview questions, I am looking for your ability to communicate both verbally and written. And then I'm looking for your capacity for empathy with the player, but also with your fellow coworkers. And I'm looking for that baseball card of like, where do you fit in the team? How do you fit? I need somebody who's like 7 out of 10 producer, 3 out of 10 like engineer, and 4 out of 10 art, but game design. And so like, I am looking for these fits because I don't actually even care that you have skill inside a game engine. It's a bonus. Well, and that's partially because I come from an era when we didn't have game engines. It was essentially like, I'm looking for your IQ, your intelligence quotient, because I expect you to learn whatever we're using. It doesn't matter, because even if it's Unreal Experience, I'm working at a place right now. We have 3 different applications or 3 different games using Unreal. They all use it differently.
Oh yeah.
So there's no like the common stuff that you learn in like an Unreal class. You might as well do that with like YouTube tutorials, because like once you hit the ground at a job, it's all custom.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think the good news about that is as long as you have a basic idea of like how code is structured, like you're basically fair game, right? Because you can just use documentation and this type of stuff. I think what I like that I hear is that I can basically be myself in the games industry. Where like if I just reach out to enough people who are looking for a junior game designer, for example, and you as a hiring manager are looking for, okay, so me, 18-year-old Liam, has maybe 2 out of 10 engineering, he's got like 4 out of 10 art, and he's got like 8 or 9 out of 10 producer, right? Or like organization skills. So if I just go to enough interviews, they're going to be looking for the person with my skill set and the way I communicate. And I can get the job. So that's really good, especially in a world that's mostly remote now, or there's a lot of remote access. If you just reach out to 1,000 people, you're increasing the odds that you are the perfect candidate for them, as opposed to needing to alter yourself, which is really nice.
Yeah. Well, but what's nice about that, right? Just a quick comment on that. This is partially why I say that like the professional value of a game design degree is almost nil for me, because I need to know who you are. That's it. Like the other thing is though, is when you look at someone's resume, you look at their list of games they worked on and what their positions were. So you're also looking for past trajectory of somebody with experience. But these days, it's really hard to tell, especially in game design, what people can claim were their skill sets. All that does for me, and I don't care if people are lying. Like it really comes down to like, I don't need to ask specific questions to verify whether or not they did certain jobs on certain games. It's irrelevant, right? If they're lying about that, it'll come out in the "who are you" questions.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. So what's really coming up for me is, look, there's a lot of different personalities in the games industry, right? So specifically in gaming, if you're trying to get into gaming, I think know your role and know the way to present to, for example, in sales, you got to be pretty cutthroat, right? You have to be very charismatic, but you also have to be cutthroat because you're going to get rejected all the freaking time. Marketing, you have to, it's very much about, I mean, all of these are about the validation of others, but it's the way that who the audience is. With
Yes.
production, so anything from art to game design to development to QA, etc., right? It's really helpful to be kind. Yes, I know that that might sound cliche, right? But if you want to be a crotchety person in this industry and not have these communication skills to work in a team environment, games are so multidisciplinary, it's not even funny as a product. And it's a product driven industry, which means like some industries, like for example, water or like bottled water, bottled sports drinks, right? That's actually all about brand. It doesn't really matter what's in it as long as it tastes pretty good. It's all about the way it's marketed. And that's why something like Logan Paul and Prime is just going crazy, right? Because he's got all these fans. With something in tech or gaming, it's all about the final product. So if you cannot work well as a team player, just being reliable, working hard, and like being able to have a cohesive conversation, those are like literally all the things I look at when I hire someone. Being a good person is really highly valuable in this industry. And I think also with you and I, maybe our following podcast here can be you interview me, right?
If you want, we'll do a 45 minutes of like, I will interview you.
And I think we can kind of peel the veil back and kind of have meta sections. So I'll be a junior.
That stuff's all irrelevant once I start asking questions anyway. That's what I just said.
Yeah, there you go.
So there's a different way to say it. I had a really good friend of mine say once, it's like, if I die and then respawn in a game, but I had rockets left when I died, they were wasted.
That is the opposite of too good to use syndrome. I suffer greatly from too good to use syndrome, where I'm playing Pokemon and I got the max revive. That is so strong that I can't use it in the Elite Four. Gosh, what happens after this? I just never use it.
I'm kind of the same way. Whereas like, but I also get caught with like the right tool at the right time, and so like I'm waiting for that right time. And sometimes you just need to drop the nuke because it's a nuke, or like you need to just go there. So here's the other part of this though, and like just to sort of wrap this all up, the thing that goes the farthest before we get to a voice interview is not only what have you made and what have you done. It's fine if you've done that with other companies, but if you make something on your own, like by yourself, like you actually execute on something. If you're 18 or 19 and you built something in Unreal, and it could be terrible, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be good, but it gives me an understanding of what your executional skill set is and what you know and how you applied it. And then I can compare that to your voice interview. Now, here's the thing. I have a much more mature look at how to hire game designers than most of the rest of the industry. There are a lot of people who are just looking for check marks and that are like clicking stuff off. So for them, a degree from a USC game program checks off a check mark. It's different. And this is also another like counter argument is like, then you're like, well, the only value I'm getting out of this degree is with these 3 hiring people, right? Not the whole industry. And so like, what I'm saying is it's so Wild West that basically you need to just become a better person and understand that the day you stop learning is the day that you stop being a game designer, because you're constantly like, there is no, once I get here, I can coast. Like even in doing what we're doing now and looking at this as a transition for me is like, I'm constantly game designing and I'm constantly learning new tools. I'm constantly learning, like it's the hacker mentality in my brain. Like after 30 years, I do not know it all. And like, here's the mega tie-in. Let's take something that's always moving, but has a very strong constant. And that's like the automotive industry. Okay. Every year, there are changes in the cars that you don't really notice. They try to sell you on them, but you're like, whatever. But you go back and look at a car from 10 years ago and you're like, wow, I drove that. Like it looks so different. Right. And like the technology moves, etc. But the basics of a car is still the same. The features that people are looking for are generally the same. It's a small car, it's a big car, it's a whatever. But that industry moves forward and has a lot of very set, standardized skills. Even the creative parts of the automotive industry has like a set criteria that they're looking for. Games is kind of different. The criteria is always shifting. The games industry is run by Moore's Law. So Moore's Law states that computer chip processing power doubles every 18 months, right? You are never standing on stable footing. And the innovations don't necessarily come in games that are going to affect your day. It's other applications that are making use of technology. That, case in point, AI that gets added to the mix of things that you should know when making games. It is such a wide spectrum of things that you should know that you can't design a curriculum that covers everybody, emphasizes their strengths, bolsters their weaknesses, and gets them placed into a job day after graduation. So when making your tens of thousands of dollars, if not like 6-digit decision on what game design school to go to, buyer beware, understand what you're purchasing, do your research into placement after degree, but also your instructors. Who's teaching you? What are they teaching you? If you can find out why are they teaching you those things, because knowing that context will arm you to be able to be an informed salad bar eater. Everybody needs to take control of their own learning space, whether it's through a university or not.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, at the end of the day, make games, right?
Essentially, but also understand that the learning is it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility no matter what method you take.
And the good news is, in the part 2 of this podcast, we'll do a mock interview. So you can nail the communication side, and now you kind of know the prerequisites of how to get into that room, with the end goal of, if you want to be in the games industry, we can be a stepping stone to get you there.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeeorcross.com.
Electricast.